And here we are, back with our second session of the Gospel of Wealth, the edition of Thou Shalt Prosper. My name is Munyumba Mutwale, and here is my lovely co-host, Bupe, the Mindprenuer. How are you doing, Bupe?
I am doing well as usual. I am so excited to be back and today discussing commandment number 1. Last week we did the introductory session, which was really, really good. So I look forward to this one too. But before we get into it, how are you doing, Munyumba?
Well, it's been a beautiful week. And it's been a beautiful couple of weeks. I know that we're now back into the swing of things, and there's something I kind of look forward to doing now. But I'm good. I'm in great spirits.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I'm excited for today's
Okay.
session.
So, for everybody who's with us, welcome to the Gospel of Wealth. We would love you to send any thoughts you have so that we can also start sharing them. If you do, please share in the comments section. And if you love what you are hearing, remember to like, share, subscribe, join us on whatever platform you're hearing this on, but join us and also stuff in a comment. And if you think somebody would benefit from this, why don't you tag them to tell them, hey, come and check this out as we talk about it. Remember that this show is about trying to find the intersection between our work, our money, and our faith. Because so that we don't have to kind of compartmentalize all of these, we can bring it together so that it's one holistic experience in your life. And specifically, this is targeted at the Christian perspective because that's who we are, that's our practicing faith. And we would like also to try and help us and kind of take on this journey. We are all struggling with this idea of talking about work and money from our biblical perspective and how that plays in. But I think it's very important to invite God into our work and money conversations. And with that, we are coming into as the first book we've been covering is Rabbi Daniel Lapin's Thou Shalt Prosper. We talked about the introduction last week, and today we'll be talking about the first commandment. Remember that this book is the 10 commandments of making money, and the first commandment is believe in the dignity and morality of business. Before we get into the main points, what in that title got you? Believing in the dignity and morality of business.
Well, I'll tell you what got me being Zambian. I think even in the last session that we had, right, we talked about how in our culture, if someone is rich, then they're either, I don't know, a Satanist or a witch or something. It's almost impossible in our context for someone to be rich in a society like ours, which is a bit contradictory when we look at the fact that we claim to be a Christian nation. And when we look at our forefathers like Abraham, like Moses, like Job, all of them were defined as wealthy patriarchs. So it's always a bit of a contradiction for me. So when we're getting into commandment number 1, I was really excited to see what was going on there. But that's what got me, like, believe in the morality of business, that there is morality in business. And I was very excited about that. What got you in the title?
I remember Dumisani Ngube actually had a quote. He said, in Zambia, when somebody moves from poverty to success, we call that person a Satanist. And he said, we say that because we believe poverty is normal, and therefore anybody who breaks away from poverty must have met with the devil somewhere. That is the mentality but whenever someone makes it, we always say they sold their years in Dubai. I
Yeah.
wonder where this exact place in Dubai where people go to sell their
I
years or all
really,
sorts of things. But now I will say, I'm not saying that there are no dark arts and there are no people who practice those things. Obviously, as believers, we
absolutely.
know that they are.
Yeah.
But to solely blame success on that is to take away from the fact that God intended for His children to be successful. So what I think people should understand is that, and I think this is where always the conflict comes. And I'll tell you this, Whoopi, it's when you grow up young and black, you're told things like capitalism is the very reason blacks have been enslaved, and some of that hits at your soul. And you're raised in a country that talks about Satanism being attached to any success. And then we're raised in a country that was communist, so we thought anybody who's rich must have stole. And
Totally.
those narratives are circulating in your mind. And if you're not careful, and I will admit to this, even I suffer a little bit from that cringiness when it comes to money. I've suffered with it because I've listened to these narratives, and this book this chapter made me
Yeah.
confront the narratives. And I actually have had a very transformative week because of that. I even shared some messages with you where I started to see a few things differently. And that's what got to me today. And I'm hoping that anybody who reads chapter 1, what I challenge you to do is to dig deep inside, be honest with yourself, and challenge the narratives that you've heard. And then ask yourself, is it possible that maybe those little earworms that I've allowed in are actually what's holding me back from fully actualizing myself financially and professionally?
Absolutely. There's a if I would rewrite the title a little bit of this commandment for the Zambian African context, it will be perhaps something in the lines of where we have to undignify poverty, because
Yeah.
like it doesn't help us. But yeah,
Yeah.
let's get into it.
Okay, so the first thing I think he goes into, the first section is making money is harder if you think it's immoral. And that's one of the things that he is basically going at, is that where there's inner resistance in your mind and in your heart to the process of making money, which is often done through businesses or at least even selling your time as a profession. You know, we can say running a business or doing business, because doing business is even at work, by the way. And so as long as you view that as immoral, so one of the things he did point out is Jews as a culture have been trained to view making money as moral, as in it's actually moral to make money. Now, he's not saying if you make money slinging drugs, and he even says that multiple times. If you're doing something that's unruly and ungodly, he said, stop that right now. It's never going to make sense. But just generally, the act of making money is not immoral. And he says the moment you split your life, and I think this is one of the problems we found, is that the moment you separate your life into work and then church, then all of a sudden you're creating this bifurcation of your life where on Sunday I worship, on Monday I work. And then you come back. And the moment you've got this split life, you're not inviting God into the working life and the money-making life. That part that generates money, you're not inviting him into it. So therefore, without him, it feels dirty. So if you struggle with it in its morality, then yes. And then the other thing that got me in that is when he talked about how powerful the brain is. He talked about the placebo effect in medical trials, and he said the placebo effect is so powerful that people can actually manifest healings from their minds. In as much as people say that's the placebo effect, that's the exact same thing Jesus used to say: "Believe and you shall be healed." So in science, they'll call it the placebo effect. We call it faith healing, but it's literally the power of that's placed into the mind of belief. So your beliefs are powerful enough to propel or resist your outcomes very powerfully. This is why I think we have to be careful what we're thinking about things. And we have to be careful because we live in a world that publicly vilifies wealth. So those are the things he really drew out, that you have to think it's moral to invite God into it. You must be careful because your mind is so powerful, it can pull you away from what you even desire. And you have to be careful what you're listening to because you're living in a world that publicly vilifies it. What are your views on that?
Absolutely love that. Two things for me, and I love how you talked about how sometimes believers wear Christianity like a garment, wear it on Sunday, then take it off during the week to continue doing life. And something I love to tell people, a lot of my close friends, I think I've even told you, and I'm not sure now, you remind me, but I'm always saying, believers, we don't do business, we don't do jobs, we don't do marriage, we don't do any of that. We do purpose. So when we get into a marriage, it's, Lord, how can I show up and do purpose in this space? When we do careers, is how do I show up? When we do business, and that's the same thing here. And from purpose, the next layer is, for me, it was belief. So the beginning of this chapter, before he breaks it down for me, it starts with what you believe. And I remember this week, and I think I shared a post on my Facebook or on my socials where I talked about the cycle of belief, right? So you have like a quadrant, and at the top you have your belief for what you're certain about. In the next one, you have your potential. In the next one, you have your action, and then you have your results. And the thinking behind that, I think it was Tony Robbins who teaches this, is that what you believe is what is going to inform how much potential you tap into, and how much potential you tap into is going to inform how much action you're going to take. How much action you're going to take is going to inform the results you get, and that's the cycle that continues. So if we believe as Zambians that for one to be wealthy, they have to be rich, you will not then tap into the potential of the fact that you have inherently in you the ability to acquire wealth. And like we said in the last session, not everyone may be Bill Gates rich, but you can get on the path of being a millionaire. Maybe you may not be a billionaire, but everyone has the ability to get onto the path of being a millionaire. But because that belief system, if you believe that for you to be rich, you have to sell your years or whatever, it will inform the potential you tap into, the actions you will take. Now, because you believe that you need to be a Satanist, you will settle for minimum. You will not read the books that you need. You will not listen to the stuff that you need for you then to achieve the results of being a millionaire. And the cycle continues. Why? Because you believe in the lack of morality and dignity of business. And that really stood out for me. So starting from the first part where we talk about, because this is targeted at believers, we have to understand that we're called to be ambassadors, and the work that we do is for the purpose and work for the kingdom. So when we show up in marriage, when we show up in business, when we show up in our careers, are we honoring God with that, and what results are we producing? So I thought that was really good. That's what stood out for me. So limiting beliefs really is the word that keeps a lot of believers out of business. We've dignified poverty because we think that making money is a sin, and that's really sad. So that was my takeaway from that first part. Yeah.
And just to add before we move on to the next part, is one Bible verse that actually goes right against this whole thing of getting wealth or making money is a sin. Deuteronomy 8:18, it says, "And you shall remember the Lord, for it is He who gives you the power to get wealth."
I
Okay?
love that. Yeah.
It goes right in the face. And this is sometimes there's the Bible telling you that your money making abilities, your ability to generate a living very well, is given to you by God. If you misuse it for the darkness, then that's a different thing. For evil, then that's a different thing. If you misuse it, that's a different thing. But it's given to you by God. I remember even one of our pastors saying, even these guys who rob banks, he says, the act of robbing a bank, yes, is not godly, but the skills required to do that. You try and rob a bank and see if you come out alive. But that person who does it has got skills in them and abilities in them, which have just unfortunately been misdirected towards acts of evil, but they could have been used for acts of good. So I just wanted to remind everyone that even the Bible says it directly, that God has given you the ability to create wealth or to get wealth. So that's
Can I just
something
add
I wanted.
something to that?
Sure.
Yeah, so in the when you were talking, there's a part in the book where they talk about the placebo effect that you've already referred to, and the author says the body performs better when the brain and the soul are on board with the program. So we're talking about, and I love that that's where he started. We've taught you already, like in the beginning, we've already talked about these are the skills you need and whatever. And then it's like we get into commandment number 1, and the author is saying, okay, let's back it up. Where do we begin? We have to liberate the mind. We have to understand what is important, and it starts in the way you think. So the body, when you want to do the habits of waking up early, reading, it will only perform better when the soul, and when we talk about the soul, we're talking about the place of our being where the thoughts, emotions, and everything comes from. So when those are okay, then the body will perform better to help you achieve what you want. And I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah. And just to even continue.
Yeah. And then he talks about the part where a lot of people, I'll give you an example, right? Another example I gave in the week about when I started the hair and braiding business. some people were shocked when I showed up at their doorsteps to unbraid their hair. And an example, when I was reading the book in preparation for this, was when he talks about, if you're embarrassed about your business, how do you expect anyone else to come on board for it? You know what I mean? Until you believe the value of what you are bringing to the table, it is unlikely that anyone else will, or even if they do, there will be a ceiling to that. And I thought that was so good.
Just to add to that, and I know we're getting into this part of feeling virtuous. There's a guy in Nigeria. He's late now. He is the biggest provider of portable toilets across Lagos. He was. They even had a banner of the guy. He was a millionaire. And he says he used to, and he would proudly walk around in a suit inspecting his portable toilets. He even had one portable toilet that it was a caravan, it had an air conditioner, everything, and you pay a premium price to use it. He was so proud of it. And he had such belief in it. People loved using his portable toilets across Lagos. Okay. So I remember he was even profiled on CNN before. And this is how big that business is. But think about how many people would have been ashamed. Like, you can't say I'm in the sanitation. You would even try and find a technical term. You can't say I sell portable toilets. I'm in public sanitation. You try and find a fancy term to make it sound like a university degree. But he was just telling you that he was giving people a place to relieve themselves. And it was that simple. And yet it was a need in society. And he said, "What if I'm not there? They're all going into the bush." That's what he kept on saying. So he said, "Look, I'm doing something dignified. I'm also fighting off illnesses in society. This is a need." So I think what people need to understand is, if you don't feel good about your business, which is the second point, feeling virtuous grows your wealth. So he did say that's what the power of the mind. But he also said, in order to grow, you need to become that new person who can feel virtuous. And you also need to have some virtuous transformation. Because remember, he said the equation was more money equals new you minus old you. So change equals more money. So there's actual change and transformation that you need to do. So there's that component of even yourself, then also seeing what you're doing as a service. The way he talked about Jews and banking, and I know people always have that negative perception of banking, and yes, there are evil bankers out there, but he did point out that, especially even in the beginning, there was a need to move money around. They did have a trusted network. So there was a need for them to be in finance. There was a need for them to do the businesses they do. So when you see yourself meeting a need, you see yourself transforming as a person, personal growth and transformation. If you can see business and making money as something that personally grows you and you get to serve people as well, I think that's where the virtue he's pointing at is.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the things that really stood out for me is the heart of the Jews in business, right? When you're talking about you need the virtue to grow your money and the examples that you have given. And when he talks about Jews became bankers to help, it wasn't a last resort. It's not like they started out thinking, yeah, let's go and exploit people, right? They started out as, if I can give another person money to help them, instead of just hand it over to them. There's an understanding that, which is something that we struggle with as Africans. I mean, I work in the development space, so I'm not against aid, but even when I work in the aid area, we try to create it in such a way that it is sustainable, and when we're just not giving handouts to people. We're trying to give them a livelihood so that even when the aid is gone, people can survive. And it looks like the Jews knew about this like centuries and centuries before, in them coming up with banks. It wasn't to exploit people, but it was to equip people, to help them gain their own wealth. And like you are saying, and you had said earlier, about business is about helping another person. If you can meet another person's need, that money will come back to you. And I feel like therein lies the virtue. And last year in the book club, we had read The Greatest Salesman. And at the heart of that was that virtue, the the fact that I am meeting your need, and because I have met that need, you're paying me my dues, and it's a symbol of it's not a symbol of, it's a due that accrues to me in gratitude. It's like an acknowledgement of service for what I have done for you, and therein lies the virtue. I really love them. The heart, what I loved was seeing the heart of the Jews when they do business. They don't pursue, it's not a strict pursuit in money. It's a lot about who am I becoming, the transformation that is going on inside of me, and the money is sort of a benefit of that transformation, as you have said.
I'm gonna say something honest here for our people,
Mhm.
and I know he's talking about the Jews here, but let's bring it home here. The Indians in Zambia, okay? The Indian Zambians, and yes, they're Zambians. They're absolutely Zambians. I'll never take that away. They've been
Yeah.
here longer than some of these people. Their grandparents were born here. They don't know India. They're just Indian
Yeah,
by color. They're not.
yeah.
They can't lie. They'll go there and be
Speak
shocked.
Nyanja and Bemba better than you.
Someone can't speak English, but he can speak Nyanja. How did he go from Hindi to Nyanja? Me, I don't understand this. But anyway, but the point I really want to drive at is that for them, they serve a need. No matter how much you make point at them, because a lot of us, we don't want to admit it, but a lot of what we say about them comes from envy. Because even you can complain and complain and complain and complain as much as you want about them, but you can't live without them. You know, somebody is actually serving a need when you know you can't live without them. You really know you can't. So at the core of it, and this is why in my whole life in media, I've always said a business is nothing but a problem solved with a product, built with a process, run by people. That's all it is, okay? So at the core of it, it's a problem solved by a product. So you just have to make sure that at the core of every business, even if you want to run a profitable business, Bupe, you're unbraiding hair. If women did not have unbraiding hair to be done, if they didn't need to have their hair unbraided, would you be in business? No.
Absolutely not.
If people didn't need financial advice and they didn't need financial plans and retirement plans, would I be in business? No.
Absolutely
At the core
not.
of it all is a need that needs to be met. Now, there's this idea that all needs must be met without any financial cost. That also, and I'm sorry to say this, that's also a form of greed from the consumer. You may think charging a price is greed from the producer, but saying that nothing should come at a cost is greed from you, the consumer, too. It's fair game here. If you have a need and you're willing to pay for it, pay for it. If they're using undue business tactics, I understand. But it is a problem. At the core of every business is a need being served. And if that business stopped operating today, no matter how much you complain about them, you would feel pain. Pain would return back to your life if that business shut down today. Okay? And so if that's the case, then that business is doing some social good because it's getting rid of pain in society. So just wanted to push that back as we're going into the next thing, is that common misconceptions that he has put and now before I get into the common misconceptions, I wanted to get into the part where he talks about the five affirmations of money that Jews have, and that he backs them.
Yeah. Before we go there, just above the chapter, when he talks about money is holy and holidays are linked to money, I didn't want us to skip that. I thought that was really good. The two feasts, what were they? Chanukah? Yeah. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes,
yeah. And during this, still learning, and the feast of Esther. I love that because again, it speaks into catechism. What's a lighter word for that? Catechism.
Kind of saying things over and over so that it sticks to become who you are.
So they have, I love that their ceremonies start to train their young ones from a very early age. And that first ceremony that, of course, I will not try to pronounce again, where it talks about they give money gifts throughout that 8 days. And they light candles. And when they light those candles should not benefit you in any way. You can't count money or whatever, because these candles are lit in a room where there's already light. So it's sort of a way to encourage conversation, but also around that time, they give children money gifts. The other one, that is the Feast of Esther, is where they share delicacies and food. So already, because they see they have these festivals over and over again, children already know that money is not evil. They're already taught from an early age that money can be gifted. They're giving food, and not just any food, but delicacies. And that creates such an abundance mindset of the fact that money is not bad and that it is a reward for self-improvement. So there's another statement that they made where the author makes, and they say, you receive money in proportion to how helpful you make yourself to other people, which is a point that we have already belabored. But I love the two ceremonies because they create such a sense of abundance and giving. Because something I have noticed, and something we talked about in the last session, was the fact that we don't have, naturally in Africa, we don't have that abundance mindset. The reason that we think that someone has to sell their souls to be rich is proof that we don't have that abundance mindset, that there's enough to go around. When you're growing up, Munyumba, I don't know what your narrative was, but I grew up in an environment where money was not given to children because it was believed that when we give money to children, they will be spoiled, they will become thieves, which is the complete opposite to what we see in this Jewish culture where children are taught about money. And then you also told me about how at a certain age, the Jewish children are gifted bonds. And it's not like they're in the adult age. These are still children. So they're already taught at a tender age to have a healthy relationship with money. Not just by that gift at a certain age of maturity, but even the celebrations that they embrace, the Feast of Esther, and this other one that I will not attempt to pronounce.
No, but it's true. It's woven into their traditions. It's not the central part of their traditions, but it's woven in that it is of importance. And so to even put it into those traditions also symbolizes its importance in society and in life. And I think that's a good point to put. And that also now speaks to the fact that if they're bringing it into their ceremonies, how do they think about it spiritually? And therefore, and I think that's where he was linking it to. Now, what are the holy perspectives of money that they have? And I think this is the big difference. One, for them, money is good. Because in the Bible, the 8th mention of the word good is when God is referring to gold. Okay? So for them, it's already...
I absolutely love that. I was just like, whoa, that's so true.
Yeah. So already, and God, this was a time where God was speaking, and to now have them say that already is now calms them with their understanding. And remember, gold was money back then. The second thing is, and this was a part, in fact, let me reserve the second one for the last one I'll talk about, but let me go to the third one, and I'll bring the second one in for a reason. Is that wealth is righteous. Wealth comes from righteous conduct. In other words, you do business well over a period of time. Now, you can get rich crooking somebody, but it's not going to last because eventually you're going to get a reputation and nobody will want to do business with you. But for you to build wealth, you're going to have to actually do business with people in a sustainable way, which requires righteous conduct. And also, it requires the use of wisdom. So 2 things. It's not one or, it's both. You must be righteous and wise. Because there are lots of righteous fools in this world, okay? And there are lots of unrighteous wise people. You need to be both righteous and wise in order to accumulate wealth. He actually pointed that out. Now, he also said money is righteous. Here's a point he said. He said, look at all the saints in the Bible. In fact, he says, look at them. Wealth was actually a prerequisite for wealth. I mean, for sainthood. For you to actually be a saint. And he talked about Moses. Then I thought about Elisha. Elisha was a businessman. Nehemiah was a businessman. When you look at a lot of these people, they were wealthy. Even Joseph eventually arose to a point of wealth. Abraham was wealthy. So when you look at the Bible, it's actually filled full of wealthy people who are at the center of it. David died a billionaire in today's terms. David died worth $8.4 billion, actually. He gave that all to the temple, and Solomon was earning, I think, about $1 billion a year as his king's salary at that point. So I'm just explaining to people that a lot of this already there is a righteousness to wealth. It's just the way you approach it. but there's a righteousness. It's fine. And then he also said money is essential. So essential that the Jewish people, when leaving Egypt, did not manage to cook out their bread properly, but they
I never
sure
said
did
that.
collect their gold.
They're both-
They said they
there were
pinned
two
that and
times
said,
that I got
hey,
to run, but there was enough time to get my money. I thought
where's
that
my
was
money?
hilarious. Give me my money. I like that.
And he just
Yeah,
said, yeah.
yeah,
They-
yeah,
But
yeah. And in
I want to
addition
think
to
about,
that, yeah. No,
oh
please
yeah, I was
finish.
saying,
Yeah.
the final of the fifth affirmation. So I just wanted to go through the four again that I've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Money is good. Wealth comes from righteous conduct and wisdom together. Money is righteous and money is essential. But the fourth one I liked was money is a blessing to pray for. Now, I have this issue where I actually realized I was only praying regarding money when there's a need in my life. I actually realized that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I only would pray to God for money when there's a financial need in my life. You almost felt cringy. And I started to ask myself,
Where
why
did
do I
that
feel
come from?
cringy?
Yeah,
Where's this coming
yeah.
from? Why isn't I pray for health every day? I pray for protection. I pray for God's guidance, which are all important. Why shouldn't I pray for money? Even Rick Warren says money is one of the 9 things a Christian should pray for every day. It's one of, not the one of, but he
The
says pray for
only.
it last because you want to get through all these other things. Pray selflessly first, then get to your material possessions finally. So I actually wanted to say, and he was talking about the fact that inside their temple, they're told to pray south, where the showbread is. And that showbread is actually a symbol of money because he says, look at the fact that you call money bread, dough in today's world. So I
Yeah.
actually thought about the whole thing of starting to even say, why shouldn't I be comfortable to say to God about wherever I work, Lord, open up the floodgates of my sales tomorrow, open up my business tomorrow. And funny enough, Bupe, I started saying those prayers and I started seeing things moving. Like I
Ask
realized that
and positive, eh?
why am I leaving God out of this part until it's a crisis? So one of the things a lot of people should ask yourself, do you cringe when you pray for money without a need, without a specific need? Do you cringe when you say, Lord, bless the works of my hands tomorrow that I may be abundant in my earnings? Lord, bless my sales tomorrow that our doors be. Do you feel cringe about saying that and ask yourself why? Like that's one
Why?
of the
Where
things
does
they
that
don't
come
feel
from?
uncomfortable with because they pray for money without need. I just wanted to put that, like, seriously, they pray for it without them being in a catastrophe. And a lot of us only do when there's a need.
Absolutely. That's very true. And I like that part when he talks about this, where he says, God is good, gold is good, God said so. And I was very excited when I saw that, because when they talked about it, was the eighth thing um that God called good after creation. It's like God puts in all the systems and he said, look, these systems are good, but for the systems to work, we're gonna need some financing. So money is good. It's not a bad thing. But I think I get an understanding of why people feel the way they feel a little cringe about praying for money. It's because it's a lot of the time attached to our selfish needs. I don't know if you understand what I mean. A lot of the time, the reason we feel cringe about praying for money is because when we pray for that money, it's not attached, like for instance, to the good of society, the way we see in the Jewish Judaism space, right? These people, when when they accumulate wealth, they are not accumulating it. And I love that in the whole book, no one talks about then they bought this type of car, then they live in these types of houses. They talk about how they continue to use that wealth for good. So, which is something that the Mindprenuer platform is sort of led by, is the fact that we are sent into the world. Genesis, is it 228 or 128? Go into the world and subdue the earth and whatever. And then in Genesis, right? So all of us have that mandate. Go and subdue. You have the authority to do that. And I will go before you. And then throughout the Bible, we have, what is that, the fivefold ministries, and in James we're told about true religion is taking care of the orphans and the widows. So we're not just subduing the earth for us to accumulate for ourselves. The purpose of us gaining wealth is for the extension of the kingdom. Others must go and evangelize. Others must help people grow as believers. You have to do your work, Munyumba, to help people in their finances. I have to do my part to liberate minds, helping people read, find information that will help them grow in their spheres of influence. Now, we are accumulating wealth not for us as the end game, but because there's a bigger picture. There's more that we need to do. When we earn this money, it doesn't end and sit in the bank. Not to say that we will not buy nice cars. We'll do all that nice stuff, but there's enough for that. But most importantly, is there's purpose behind it. We are called. So for me, it's something that is very close to my heart, is taking care of orphans and widows. For me, I feel like that subduing the earth speaks to, once in my little corner of purpose, it is helping orphans and widows. So I think a lot of cringe comes from the fact that a lot of our wealth accumulation is very selfish. We want to prove to people, those people told me I'll never make it, I will show them. Or I need to buy this house, I will show them. But when we have a broader perspective, a kingdom perspective, then we can pray and say, Lord, bless me so that I can be a blessing to others. And that's what I see in here. They started banks because they want to help people. It doesn't end with themselves. And something I like was what the author touches on when he quotes Solomon, and he says, the crown of the wise is their wealth. Right? I thought that was powerful. And it speaks into the last point that I said. So the crown of the wise is their wealth, not just because they have the wealth, because we will see your wisdom once you have wealth. So we'll either see your wisdom or the lack thereof. And that's what I like about that statement. The crown of the wise is their wealth. So it's telling us, maybe as a general rule, that one of the benefits of wisdom as a general rule will be to gain wealth. Others are wise, but they won't gain wealth because of the nature of their wisdom and where they are placed. But as a general rule, people who are wise tend to have money as a how you call it, as a benefit. And then another thing where he talks about how money is closely related to bread. I like even the Lord's Prayer when it says, give us our daily bread. Bread doesn't fall like the fact that manna fell from heaven for the Israelites was an exception to the rule. It wasn't the general rule. How does bread come on our tables? We have to work. That's how it comes, because it's not falling like manna. So when we say give us this day our daily bread, it speaks to what you had said. Pray for your money every day, because how are you going to eat if your work is not blessed, if your business is not blessed, if the Lord is not guiding you into those kinds of spaces? Another one, because I love children and Sunday school teacher, is they talked about how they have the conviction that the only real way to achieve wealth is to diligently attend to the needs of others. But also the children part was when they tell their children, may God make you Ephraim and like Manasseh. And then Ephraim speaks to spiritual steadfastness, because it's like you need the two limbs, spiritual steadfastness, and Manasseh spoke to economic creativity. Goes back to why we're cringe again. We're cringe because the purpose we want money is selfish. But if you are spiritually steadfast and you have economic creativity, you will be useful to the kingdom. So I thought that was truly powerful, and I really love that. I've talked a lot.
And thank you for ending there. That's the reason it's ordained you ended there, because it actually links into the common misconception of business.
Yeah.
And the common misconception of business that's out there is that charity is good and business is bad. Now, are we saying charity is bad? No. Okay, it's not bad to help people. But what I want to get down to is, in as much as, and I know we take this whole kingdom perspective where we'll say we're here to kind of help people in society, and that's good,
It's
but
good.
equally good, Wupe, is every entrepreneur does two things when they do business. They solve a problem, which is also relieving a pain. Okay,
Okay,
if you
absolutely.
actually do product creation, you'll understand that all products are pain relievers. Every product you sell relieves an emotional or physical or mental pain that someone is going through. Okay,
And brings pleasure. And in some
and it
instances, brings pleasure. And brings pleasure,
and,
yeah.
and peace, pleasure, and peace into their heart. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not a curse. If you actually think about the business you're doing, you are bringing someone pleasure. Or you're bringing someone peace. Somebody comes to you, Whoopi, and said, "My braids, my hair is all over the place. I need someone to unbraid it before I go crazy." And then when you've done a good job unbraiding their hair, how do they feel? Relaxed, peaceful. So what you've sold them is peace. So always remember that every business is a problem solved and also a job created. There are two initial blessings. So what Rabbi Lapin is saying is inherent in business is already two acts of selflessness. Because I'm telling you, if you go to any church, I'm Pentecostal, so I'll just use our example. Every week somebody's praying for a job. Every week, someone is praying for a job. I don't
Yeah.
care what you say. Somebody's always up there, Pastor, please. I've been unemployed for how long? Lord, I need a job. I need a job. I need a job. That's the number one prayer. So, how can you vilify if the biggest prayer request out there is a job? Then is it not godly to create jobs through business?
Yeah.
So, equally as altruistic and society and all those things are, it is equally important. In fact, it is so important to create jobs for people that most of these problems we're facing socially, and to be honest, even Zambia, the biggest problem we have, even they've actually the World Economic Forum actually
Yeah.
released their report, which said the biggest problem in Zambia is unemployment and underemployment. Okay. Number one problem we're facing, it causes political instability, it causes health problems, it causes family problems, all this strife we're seeing in society. First problem we're dealing with is no one has jobs. Okay, the mass society here are all seeking jobs and nobody's producing them for them. So the first step that we need to look at is it is God's work to produce jobs for people. That's also God's work. And so we have this thing where you have to be proud as a business person, the same way someone is of doing charitable works. Because he said the business people he went to into their offices, they were so willing to show all these programs, they were doing these education programs, everything. But he said, why aren't you equally so proud of the customers you're serving every day and of the people who you're creating jobs for? Yes, you've made wealth, but inherent in that creation of wealth are millions of people who have been able to go home and feed their families, switch on their lights, put gas in their cars, people who are able to make a living. Because as much as people say work is hard, unemployment is worse, people. The unemployment is a scourge. Okay, it's a painful scourge. And then the second thing is that there are people with problems out there. And when you solve their problems, you're relieving their pain. So if you actually look at that positively and say, yes, we've done charity, but also stand there and say, we've created 500 jobs. That's 500 families, or even if you say we've created 10 jobs, guess what? That's 10 households that have a means. 10 households can switch on their lights. 10 households can put food on the table. There's food that children can have now because you've created
they can
10
go to
households.
school and get an education.
Exactly.
You're
So
solving a generational problem for them too.
that is equally a blessing. And I would like as many people to, I know that I've really rambled on that point, but I think the next
very valid point. And I'm glad that you've spent some time there. Yeah.
Because I was talking to you before when we are getting into the show that I once did this in a prayer group where we were talking about it, and I said, even as an entrepreneur, when you create work, and I remember the cell group leader, who was an entrepreneur himself, opened his eyes and said, wait, so he says, I never thought about it this way. that when I create work, I said, yes, every single person you pay a salary to has got a home they're taking that money to. And they've got a home now they can feed, take care of, protect, provide for. They've got children who they can send to school, put clothes on, because you've created this engine here that they could have a job in this idea you created. Okay?
Yeah.
And every customer you're serving who had money in their hand but nowhere to take it to solve their problem, they have been relieved of their pain. So I think about the social good. Think about your business as a social good as much as a scholarship program, as much as anything else, because your business is a social good. That's what I wanted to put out.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really love that point, and I'm glad you explained it that way. For me, this first commandment was a lot about the heart behind the business, and I don't want to add anything to that because I think you have explained the heart behind it very well.
So the last points he was talking about, and I think I just wanted to now go into, is where are we getting this notion? And I think this is the final part we're going to, is where are we getting the notion that business is bad? So he talks about a few things that obviously in education, there's been a lot of negative narratives to business. If a child says they want to be an entrepreneur in class, that person is almost laughed at and said, "Ah, you want to be that greedy entrepreneur," when that can be something positive in life. He's talked about movies, how every bad guy these days is being portrayed by a businessman, the evil corporate business person, even though at the end of the day, when that business vanishes, you'll be crying and saying, "But why are we jobless?" You'll be crying. You'll be the same ones crying for jobs when that business shuts down and goes. So this is the problem. So there is an inherent good in there. And then he also talked about the fact that even media has always reported on business more negatively than anything else. And part of it he talked about was the upside down culture, where he said in society, he says we've even got this narrative that sex is good. And I'm not talking about sex in marriage. He's talking about adulterous sex is good, but business is bad. And he profiled and said the top 10 relationships, the romantic stories. And then he went one by one and said, look, these are mostly adulterous relationships that they've profiled. Yet they go and say corporate killers because somebody went and downsized their workplace. And then he asked a question, which I think we should all really gravitate on. He said, what's worse, a husband who destroys their family by going into some philandering pursuit, or a person who's laid off from a job and they can find a new one? It is far easier to find a new job than it is to find a new spouse from a broken marriage.
You know, I love love, so I'll always dwell there. Look, and that point is very, very important, because it's very easy to see a philandering husband as one person. But what people don't see when we talk why, and someone might be tempted to ask, but why are you making a comparison between adulterous sex and a corporation? The principle is the same. Both of them are affecting lives. If we have a philandering husband, that is children destroyed, that is a home destroyed, citizens destroyed by the action of one person. While someone can lose a job, become redundant today. Yes, we have said it's very hard to find a job, but the education is still theirs. They can still learn with free online courses. The trauma that they will experience losing a job compared to a child or a wife or a husband coming out of an adulterous relationship is way worse, and it affects society in very, very deep, damaging ways. But people would speak highly of a corporation that renders employees redundant, highly in a negative way, and will be very quiet about, let men be polygamous, men are just that way, or now women are liberated, let them just do whatever they want. No, we're looking at the consequences and the impact on society. And that's why I felt like that comparison was so, so important.
And why did he bring that in? Because he says the next point, he says that, you remember that title where he says human beings are not just smart animals. And one of the things that has been trying to pull is that they're trying to get us to become animalistic. In other words, impulse-driven beings. Now,
and we're getting there, unfortunately.
Business requires personal responsibility. For you to start a
Yeah.
business, Bupe, you have to say, I am not going to depend on another person for anything. I am going to
Yeah.
take responsibility. I am entitled to nothing. I am afforded
Yeah.
opportunities. And therefore, everything is
Yeah.
my responsibility to do.
Responsibility. Mm.
When you take a role like that, that is human responsibility, and that's counter nature. Then he talked about the fact that human beings were made in God's image. So we're made to almost go against some of these things, we're counter the culture and we're counter our impulses. So he actually said the act of business is almost our spiritual nature, our ability to go above and beyond just pursuit of impulse and to go there and say, what problems in society can I solve with this business? And I love that human animalistic view where people are trying to sell, you're just a human being, an animal. So go and have sex with as many people as you want. Go and just plunder, go and always get what you want, but never focus on maybe the needs of society. Now, as I said, they're corrupt business people. Yes. But the reality is that it is far easier for us to point the finger at them, knowing that we're living our vices. And that I think was at the core. I think that was an excoriation of ourselves to say, look into your heart and say, are you not just trying to do as thou will? Because remember, at the beginning of this whole anti-corporation movement was that statement by, what was his name? There was this guy who was evil guy, but he patented the statement, "Do as thou will." Aleister Crowley, Church of Satan guy, and he was basically behind that hippie movement. He would tell people, "Do as thou will." So, in other words, this whole thing of just running after your impulses and forgetting any responsibility, go and impregnate as many people as possible, but never take care of them in society. That is where a lot of this comes from. And I'm saying that, yes, there are even business people that do that. But a lot of it is trying to say we need to start having a more personal responsibility society. And in fact, in Germany, when they actually found that children were being trained in personal responsibility, guess what they found? Entrepreneurship levels up. That's one of the things that they started to pick up. Entrepreneurship levels rose because people started being trained in personal responsibility. So I kind of went through the narratives, we're being fed narratives, but underneath it all, we're being fed a narrative of forget your responsibilities, run after your urges.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And closely tied to that was the point where I think the example, I think this would have been even a good place. The Rothschild guy who had a deal with the prince and he was lending as an intermediary, and he didn't disclose who his client was, even when he was offered an amount of money. The only way we're going to be people who will preserve our integrity is when we become persons of character. And as because our audience for this particular show is believers, so I won't be ever getting into how you become a Christian. I assume we have believers. Is we have the advantage of the fact that we already have the Spirit, Holy Spirit as our guide. So what we want to be pursuing is like when they talked about Rothschild, they talked about what made him a successful business person, him and his sons, was the fact that they had reputation and trustworthiness. So it's okay in the moment you can be that person who goes around, impregnates or do whatever. But ultimately, these things are about legacy. When we talk about wealth building, we can't talk about wealth building just for your lifetime. And I feel like a lot of people miss this perspective when it comes to wealth building. When we talk about let's become rich, that's one thing. But when we talk about wealth building, it's legacy that we're talking about. You're not only building for now, we're talking about generations. And it's not only money. What quote unquote demons are you passing on into the next generation? Because the character that you are is what you're going to pass on into the next generation. If you're a faithful father to your faithful husband to your wife, that's the legacy you pass on to your children. If you are a wealth builder, if you have trustworthiness and reputation, because your father before you was that, someone will want to do business with you because they know the power of passing on wealth, and not just financial wealth, the wealth of character, the wealth of reputation, the wealth of trustworthiness. There's certain businesses, just because you show up with that name, they will do business with you, not because of
Mm.
you as the person who has shown up there, but because of the name that is backing the activity you have
The
come
name
to
that
do. And I
went
think that
before you.
before you, and that's what wealth building is about. It's about legacies. What are we investing into the future? So it may look like what I'm putting in now is small and meaningless, but in the future it will pay dividends. And I love the heart, and I love the thinking of the Jews, and I'm really enjoying this book.
No, because I think it really goes against the limiting beliefs that we have
Yeah.
had. Now, to those who read it, obviously we're not going to give you the whole book because he goes into
Yeah.
examples of the fact that that that
Yeah.
that people like Starbucks put their
Yeah.
they market
Yeah.
all the good deeds they do, but they forget that the millions of employees they have and
They
the business
matter.
they've created in
They
itself
matter.
intrinsically is a good thing.
It's
He
a
talks
good
about Bain
thing.
Capital, who are trying to show themselves to be altruistic by doing social welfare consulting when really
Yeah.
the work they do is already good in itself. So he is
Mm.
trying to say you have to see the work you are doing as inherently good, and
Mm.
in order to do that you have to see, and this is one of the things he's trying to break down, is we only see businesses as good because they give back. And he says that wording is
Mm.
already the dangerous one.
It's already
When you say
it's
giving back,
problematic. Yeah.
because you're
It's
saying
like they've
up to
taken
this
something
point.
from you. What have they taken from you?
But in
Yeah.
order to take the money out of your hands, they gave you a product and a
Yeah.
service which you chose. Okay. Now, me, if I had this conversation about government who just takes, that's a different story because
That's
me, I didn't ask.
different.
That's not a service. That's a different
No,
story.
and compliance government anyway. Anyway,
But
topic for another day.
another
Yeah.
day. But the point I'm trying to say is that, and it's because people are being groomed to believe that government and charity are the only good in society. When, as I said,
Mm.
you go to any church, especially I'll say Pentecostal because I'm there, the number
Mm.
one prayer is a job. Okay.
Yeah.
And people are looking for their problems solved. They're looking for better internet, better food, better this. People are looking for these things actively.
Mm.
And when you're there, they rush for them to buy them. So it's not a
Mm.
problem if you're selling. So please always understand. And I've actually seen people say, I feel uncomfortable selling because I feel like I'm trying to rip money off this person or
People
I'm
are.
begging for money.
Yeah.
But what you need to
Yeah.
recognize is when you're selling to a person, you are doing good in their lives. There's a
Yeah.
pain they have. If you look at it and then if you solve that
Yeah.
pain with honesty, I follow this marketing, this woman who teaches marketing or digital marketing is Alex Catoni. And she says,
Mm.
I teach people to sell with ethics and integrity, ethics, empathy,
Mm.
and integrity. And she says,
Mm.
always solve an actual problem. Always
Mm.
be honest with your client and always have integrity. And these are very important things. So it is important to talk
Yeah.
about the intrinsic good of business. If you can see
Yeah.
your business as intrinsically good, regardless of any social programs you've put into, the fact that you've solved customer problems and you've
Mm.
served and you've created jobs for people, that alone is
Yeah.
already transformative in society. You have already given to society when you do that. That's what he's trying
Yeah.
to break to say. And so any giving beyond that is more giving. And that's just generosity. And that's good. That's encouraged. But
Yeah.
already there are people who can go home and say, I'm proud enough to say I have a job at such and such a place, and I get to put electricity in my house. I get to give my kids transport. I get to put food. I get to have a budget with money flowing through it instead of just needs unmet, where I have to go around in society begging people to help me. I've actually got a means by which I can meet my needs in an honorable and dignified way. And that's one of the things I just wanted to point at before we get into the final, I think, two recommendations he gives in order to counter all of this. I urge everyone, this is a chapter you need to read. Bupe, any thoughts before we get into those final recommendations and close out?
Yeah, so I was actually in my closing thoughts when you were just talking about that, and I just wanted to go back to the conversation about how we were persuaded, first of all, from our education. You gave the example of how one person would say, I want to be an economist, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. Those kinds of people are celebrated. But if someone says, I want to be a business person, then they're looked down upon as a ripoff. And all these things come from the media, listening to the news, professionals ourselves who constantly tell people about how, look, yes, it's true, entrepreneurship is hard. It's super, super hard. But if someone has the grit and the tenacity for it, by all means, let them do it and support them, right? And there was also a part where they talked about we can't help believing certain things. And I feel like it's built into the narratives that we hear every day, that sometimes we can't help believe what we hear. Right. And one of the things that I used as an example when I was taking my notes was the notion of the majority of democracy, basically. Majority wins. So if enough people say that business is bad, we have a society that believes it. There is also the principle of there is no smoke without fire. If there is this rumor about it, chances are there is truth to it. So it's very important for us to guard our minds. And a lot of Commandment 1, I felt like, was talking about what is the state of your mind? What is the state of your heart? Guard that, because that is what is going to inform how you're going to show up in the world for the things that you are called to do.
So, what is the word of Voltaire, the prophet? The heart is the ears are the avenue to the heart. Or as Jay-Z once said it, first I had the streets, then I had the charts, then I had their ear, then I had their heart.
I knew but in my heart, I knew that after that there's a music thing coming. But yeah, now we'll never forget.
No, but the point is, and the point is that whatever you believe is a sign of what you're listening to. So one of the things he advises to people is the world is already, and why he's saying the world is already naturally feeding you negative information about business. The news,
Absolutely.
your education, professionals, even people who are saying, we're going to market more of our charity than the customers we serve. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you say X customers saw what's it served, that is true. That's already a service. But we would rather put what we do with our charitable contributions and those things rather than and if you go into the Copperbelt Energy financial statements, it actually says they even break down how much they've paid to suppliers. They do stuff and say, how much have we paid to the businesses, local businesses that we've done business with? This is how much we pay out to them. Jeff Bezos said, I said, I'm worth $180 billion and Amazon is worth $1 trillion. So he said, I've actually made $820 billion worth of wealth for other people, not myself, other people.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that I'm every day I'm working. Other people are also benefiting, whether it's fellow shareholders, suppliers, customers, employees. They're all, a business has got stakeholders in it who benefit from this thing running, such that the moment it switches off, how many lives get impacted? Think about even in the copper belt. I know we always have this conversation about investors, and I'm sure people, yes, I've said it too. But when those mines shut down, look how many lives get destroyed. How many families go hungry because a mine shut down? How many suppliers went out of business because a mine shut down? How many food service providers went out of business because that mine shut down? It shows you the intrinsic good of just this business operating. So what he's trying to say is that the news, education, and movies will feed you negative stereotypes of businesses already. So what you need to do is you need to counter that with positive information about businesses. And one of the final things we said is that a lot of these institutions seek to dehumanize business. If you just read about business from the news, all you see is numbers, a brand name, a big building, and a corporate entity. And education will often speak to that way, and also the media will speak to it that way. But what you need to do is pick up the book of an entrepreneur themselves. Dumisan Ngube is an example. Read his story. How did he become who he is? Where did it come from? Read it. Read Clever Mpoha's story as well. Where did this come from? Read what's a Phil Knight story. When you read the stories of these entrepreneurs, you know what the beautiful thing you start to discover is their business becomes human again. That's the truth. Their business becomes human when you read their story and they tell you their journey, because human beings connect with a journey. So, do you know one of the reasons why you should read business books and read stories about entrepreneurs? Because it'll make you see the morality in business. Because now
And
you're
for
connecting
yourself.
a human to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and yourself, because reading Phil Knight's, Phil Knight's book last year on your recommendation, I would have never thought him as a human being was someone I could relate to. And human beings connect to human beings. And
exactly.
when I started the Mindprenuer platform, it didn't start as the Mindprenuer. It started as the Givers Project Zambia, right? And a lot of my story was just trying to find purpose. I already knew that where I wanted to take this was to deal with, supporting widows and orphans, right? And when I read Shoe Dog, I learned that he too had a struggle with what does purpose mean to him. So now when I look at the brand Nike, how do you say it? Is it Nike or Nike? I
Yeah.
never know. Yeah. When I look at it, when I look at the brand now, because I know Phil, it now represents something that is close to me. And even when I
Yeah.
see it, no matter what the price is, if I find a legit one, I'm more willing to buy because I've connected with the person who struggled with purpose, who solved the problem for someone. And now they've made money off it. They've billions, millions of jobs have been created. Something innovative was done. But the person behind it, I could see myself in that person. But if I had not read that book, it would have just been another brand, another corporation that's just trying to milk money
Mhm.
from us. So just to agree with that point, it's so important to read these biographies, autobiographies, because humans connect with humans. And until you see that it's possible for another person and that they can make these changes, it's hard for you to see that for yourself as well, that it is possible.
So with that, we urge you all. This has been a journey for us. This is
Yeah.
so much knowledge, and this is, trust me, we haven't even covered half of the aha
Not
moments
even
that
a
you're going to
quarter.
have
Not even
in this
a
chapter. And I say what I said at the beginning. I challenge you to challenge
quarter.
your beliefs. Dig into yourself and ask yourself, isn't this what I think? Look at the videos you see on TV and say, look at the way they're showing these people as greedy tyrants. Now, are there greedy business people? Yes. But just
Absolutely.
because they are greedy business people, that doesn't make business greedy. You
Bad.
need to be careful of that. That's a very dangerous way of thinking. The moment it's like saying there are black people who steal, therefore black people are thieves.
All black
That's
people
a
are
very
bad.
dangerous way of, yeah, that's a very dangerous way of thinking. So you have to be
Yeah.
careful of that. And therefore, if you want to make money, your heart, your mind needs to be on board
Mm.
with it. And the way it becomes on board with it is if you humanize it and if you see the act of making money, the act, not the offshoots you can do, just the act itself as a social good. Because as a
Mm.
country in Zambia, where we have such a high unemployment rate, we should personally know how painful it is for people to have no jobs and for there to be no business activity. We should personally know that. And we should therefore then look at it. So the action point is connect more with entrepreneur stories and journeys so that you can also see the morality and humanity in just doing business itself and building a business so that you can too can be inspired.
Absolutely. I don't even want to preempt that. That was such a beautiful close, and I love that. Check the belief, check the mindset, check the actions. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. Check the beliefs. Thank you so much, Munyumba. This has been amazing, as usual. I look forward to
And
commandment number 2.
thank you to everyone. See you next week on commandment number 2. And like we said, like, share, subscribe, and and post a friend's name in there if you think they'll benefit from this. With that, we wish you a wonderful and blessed day.